there was a UFC Fight Night card, and main evented by Curtis Blades and Sergei Pavlovich. And like I said, I didn't see the fight, but I was surprised before I went to bed. I was seeing a lot of talk that maybe Sergei Pavlovich is, a guy that might have a reasonable shot of taking the title off of Jon Jones at heavyweight. Now, we know that Jones versus Stipe Miocic is the next fight. And so I don't know if it was you and I who've probably talked about this on the show, that might be, win or lose, a reasonable retirement point for Jon Jones if he kind of knocks out or finishes Miocic. If he loses, maybe you're gone anyway. And if you win, how long do you want to hang around and take some smaller fights that aren't going to be quite as profitable? But for Sergei Pavlovich, this is his 6th straight victory with a first-round knockout. That's the first time that's happened in the heavyweight division in the UFC. Is that enough for you where you would want to then see that? Is that what's next for Pavlovich, or do you think he needs to show a little more? Like, what do you make of that fight against Curtis Blades, and what does that leave Sergei Pavlovich with next?
Oh, man, I don't even know where to start on that one. Yeah. But you know what I wanted? I wanted Jones versus Pavlovich originally because I believe he was a stand-in backup guy for Jones versus Gane. And I was like, you know what? Jones versus Gane is probably not going to be exciting. It didn't move the needle at all for me, but the hype was already there around Jon Jones being a heavyweight, right? Yeah. So I was on board with, not cheering for someone to get injured, but for a replacement fight to happen between Jones versus Pavlovich. But what's next for Jones? I think it needs to be this. No offense to Stipe Miocic, but you fighting Jon Jones is just like you just got pretty much knocked out for the last 2-3 years against.
And you've been gone for 18 months.
Yeah, and
it's one final chance to use that name. That's all this is, right?
I agree with it, but I don't like it because I believe that for Miocic, go right off into the sunset. You won your fight against DC.
Yeah.
I feel like your fight against Ngannou was very much like you're older. I get it. He's always been a lighter heavyweight as well.
Yep.
He usually comes in around the 240 to 245. So he's a little bit on the lighter side when he's usually in the octagon. So it's like you're getting in there with some of these nasty guys, and you don't need to go to war with some of them now. So I don't like the Miocic, especially after he had the opportunity to fight Ngannou for whatever, or fight Jones originally, and nobody wanted to fight Jon Jones in his first fight, and then Miocic is I call winner. It's like, you know what, I love you, Miocic, but it's like I really didn't like that. I was like, cheap, dude, you've had your opportunity to get this fight, and you just haven't done it. So that's where I was like, you know what, Miocic, I kind of want you to just ride off into the sunset or have another fight, but just not be one of these top contenders, because even if he does win, which I don't think he's going to anyways, what are you going to do? You're going to retire regardless, but you just didn't do it in your last fight against Ngannou because you weren't sure what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But getting another fight to just kind of get maybe knocked out again or beaten by Jon Jones, and I know
there's a business too, right? He's going to make some money off that Jones fight, whether he loses or wins, right? There is that element, but...
For sure. But I absolutely think Pavlovich is the next guy that needs to fight Jon Jones for the belt.
But we are going to do Jones Miocic, right? That's happening.
As far as I know, I haven't seen it official anywhere.
No, they wanted to do it at Fight Week in July. By all accounts, that's not going to happen, and it might have to wait till September, I believe is the last I saw. But that's going to happen. Pavlovich won't jump the line, I don't think.
No. And for Pavlovich, I don't know what more you need to do to get that title shot. You've already knocked out guys like Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa, who Tuivasa was right there for a title shot next. Like you said, 6 in a row, first round knockouts. His only loss. He's 18-1. His only loss came in his very first UFC fight to Alistair Overeem, which was also a first-round knockout loss.
Right.
So this guy hasn't, and since he's been to the UFC, he hasn't seen round 2.
No.
He's a bit of a monster. And when I break down a little bit of the fight I saw from last night was, for Curtis Blades, he's more of a wrestling heavyweight, and he's coming off of his interesting fight where it was kind of the TKO, but he didn't really do much in that fight. But he's a wrestling guy. And watching the fight last night, he wanted to box with Pavlovich. It's like, Pavlovich has hands of stone. This guy is nasty. He's got some sneaky speed on him, but he's just he's fearless. And seeing him last night just kind of go right into the face of Curtis Blades, and he's just eating jabs, but he's throwing, and he's getting by the guard of Blades with these punches, and it's the way he sets up his punches, where he loves his left hand uppercut followed by the right hand haymaker, and he loves that combo. And when it for Blades, he didn't really try to make a takedown until he'd already been knocked out by, knocked down. But, he was already knocked down at one point early in the fight, about 2 minutes or 3 minutes into the fight. He was knocked down by Pavlovich, and he's like, all right, this guy's got some power. It's like, you don't think, dude, like, you probably shouldn't be trying to trade with this guy
coming in. Yeah.
No. So he has kind of like this desperate attempt to take down Pavlovich, and he just stuffs it completely. And he's just like, that was the momentum of the fight right there. It just reeked of desperation. Pavlovich went on a little bit more and just absolutely just hammered him with some very intense shots. His power is nasty. Like, him versus Ngannou would be just one of those nasty boxing fights.
It sucks so much. We're not going to get to see that yet. Like, that's.
Yeah, not yet, but I have a feeling we're going to see Ngannou back in the UFC.
I hope you're right about that, man.
I believe it. So I absolutely believe that Pavlovich deserves the next title shot. Like, this guy has been nasty and he's been a monster. If I'm him, I'm going to kind of pull a Sugar Sean O'Malley and just sit around and wait for that to happen.
I was just going to ask you, would you wait or do you got to stay busy?
Yeah, because the heavyweight division is nasty, right? Like, get into one fight
a bit, and like, let's say Stipe and Jones doesn't happen until September. Now, whoever wins that fight, and I'm with you, it's going to be Jones. They're going to want a few months to recover and build up a camp. So are we talking December, January, February? Can Sergei Pavlovich sit around that long, or is he going to be forced to take another fight kind of September, October to stay on turn? And it's a little risky, right? You never know what happens, and you get knocked off your track to the title.
Yeah, the only fight I think that would make sense for a guy like Pavlovich would be Tom Aspinall, and that mainly because of what happened to him in his last fight, where he's in England, I believe, and he tore his ACL, or he got injured in the fight against Curtis Blades, so it's kind of a iffy fight, and he's kind of dropped down to number 5 in the rankings because of that. But if you want to fight Ciryl Gane, it's like, all right, well, Ciryl Gane maybe, but I don't really see that appeal for him there. Yeah. Tom Aspinall, though, he's also a nasty guy that likes to box, and would be a lot of fun to see these two guys go at it. But I'm not really feeling it. If I'm Pavlovich, like, you kind of got to wait, and I'm okay with waiting because there's just not a lot of fights around you that you need to fight. You don't need to fight Tuivasa once again. I don't see you fighting Volkov or Spivak or
some of these guys out already.
Yeah, and it's just like these guys are all right there, and they're kind of climbing slowly. But I believe that, and you know what, maybe something doesn't happen, and Miocic doesn't end up having that fight. Like you said, they announced yesterday, and I believe with Dana White a couple days ago, that 290 is going to be International Fight Week, July 8th. A couple fights were already announced, but the headliner still isn't there.
Yeah.
So they're waiting on another fight, and I don't know what it is, but I wouldn't be surprised to see if we get a crazy fight we haven't heard about yet kind of announced for that.
Okay. I
don't know if something is going to happen where Miocic drops out and John Jones. Something tells me John Jones doesn't want to be fighting Pavlovich anytime soon. He's always been a very calculated in the way
he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. Yeah.
No, and I think I've seen a couple people saying, well, why would John Jones want to even fight this guy? Like, John Jones can pretty much retire after another fight or two.
Yeah.
And it's like, he probably could, but that's just not John Jones. This is an interesting guy who wants to fight. I think he's going to stay a little bit clear of a guy like Pavlovich for a little bit, especially when, like you said, Miocic is the guy that he wants to fight next. I just don't know, man. I want it to be Pavlovich. I don't know why Miocic gets this next fight for no reason. I get that there's a respect factor here, but it just does
just the names,
is
right, sell the names. That's it.
Yeah, and even if you do try and sell the names here, though, you're just kind of like, the one thing I've always liked about Dana White and the UFC is they usually give the fighter they'll give the fight to the guy that deserves it more than they'll do respect fights. And I feel like Miocic getting this fight is a respect fight. And it just, when you have a guy like Pavlovich, who's like your kind of star and heavyweight in the making now that Ngannou's gone, he's probably the future of your division. Like I said, Aspinall's another guy that's interesting after his injury. I'm curious to see how he fights back, but he was on a pretty good, trending upwards. And same with even a guy like Tai Tuivasa, right? He had the loss to Gane, but he also got knocked out by Pavlovich.
Is it too soon? Like you said, 290 fight week doesn't have a headline yet. Is it too soon? Because Pavlovich, I can't imagine he got that beat up, right? Like that was a pretty run-of-the-mill day at the office for him on Saturday night here. And John Jones has been waiting. He could start a camp tomorrow if you told him this is your guy, and he'd be ready as well. Like, they clearly wanted to do Miocic versus Jones as the headliner for International Fight Week in July at 290. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Do you think it's possible that they tell Miocic, sorry, man, like maybe next, maybe not, but we're going to do Jones versus Pavlovich at 290, or is that too soon?
I don't think it's too soon at all. You got at least 8 weeks. If you think about, you have all of May and all of June.
Yeah.
Both fighters are already at weight, right? Like Pavlovich fought at 260 last night, so
right.
he wasn't like he was the six. He's 6'3", 260, and Blades was in there, I think 6'4", 265. So you get around to that, and it's like, all right, the weight wise, John Jones we already know is in around weight. I don't believe John Jones is a guy that's sitting there at 280 pounds right now.
No.
If anything, I might believe he might have lost a bit of weight, and he might have to gain a bit more. But he still weighed in, I believe, was it 250? I can't remember.
It was right around there, yeah.
He wasn't far off of making the max weight of 265 as a heavyweight, right? I think
he wanted to come in with some bulk against Gone, right? And so yeah.
And so I look at this as what should they do next, and is it enough time? I think that's the fight you need to make for International Fight Week. John Jones versus Pavlovich, I think that'd be huge. And there's lots of time over the next couple of weeks here, but
I'll tell you what, man, I'll give you my opinion on that. To me, that's the fight that fight fans want to see, Pavlovich versus Jones. I think Jones, for better or worse, versus Miocic is the bigger, the one you can sell to a more casual fan. And that's often what they try and do at International Fight Week, right? It's big names. And so while us as fans want to see Pavlovich Jones, I still think, and obviously Miocic isn't going to happen in July for whatever reason. I do wonder, though, if they would spend it here. Because Dana's also all about selling fights. And I do think they do a better buy rate on Jones Miocic than they will on Jones Pavlovich.
Yeah, I agree, but I also disagree because I feel like the hype around Pavlovich is real right now.
Yeah.
Especially after his last 2 wins.
Capitalize while he's hot.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it needs to be. Whereas Miocic, we haven't heard about for 2 years. And the last time we've heard about him is when he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou, and it didn't look good. And I thought that was it for him there.
Yes.
It's been a while since we've seen Miocic, and his name is there. I feel like that's more of a legendary fight too.
Yep.
And while, like I said, it's more of a respect and legendary, it's like John Jones wants to beat the greatest heavyweight of all time because he wants to be the greatest heavyweight of all time, right? Like that's going to be his thing. But at the same time, you could give Miocic the greatest heavyweight of all time honor just because of his resume, but the last few years he hasn't been. And the greatest heavyweight in the division right now is Pavlovich. He is. And I feel like if you want to fight the best of the best, it needs to be this. And I think that, having John Jones versus Pavlovich on International Fight Week is a great way to then help build Pavlovich's platform and make him the next big guy. Right? That's the perfect time to do it is International Fight Week. Whereas Miocic, it's like everybody kind of knows the inevitable is like, all right, he's going to fight, he's going to lose against John Jones, and he's going to retire.
Yeah,
and,
you're right.
You know what
you're
I mean?
Right.
It's like that storybook has already been written, so I don't know if it's going to sell tickets, whereas I feel like it'll already kind of be it's going to sell regardless, especially when we've seen now it's Brandon Moreno, he's finally going to fight somebody else. It's Pantoja for the title.
Yes.
But Whitaker versus Duplessis, like that's another fight, but that's the third fight. I want to see a huge fight for this. And as I look around, there's a lot of big names out there that it could probably fight on this card and be the main event. But I feel like that is the one that's sitting there, and you have like a week or so to make it happen because, you have 8 weeks between all of May and all of June to kind of get ready for this July 8th card.
Yeah.
I want to see it happen. There's not a lot of other fights that you're kind of waiting on right now. And I feel like that, like you said, after watching the fight, Pavlovich took a couple jabs to the face, but otherwise he's clean and he could easily get ready to go for this fight. I guarantee he'd want to fight International Fight Week. He's already called out wanting the belt. He knows what he's doing. So I feel like this is a push for him and his camp to, hey, like give us that fight, International Fight Week, because otherwise I look around, it's like, well, what else is going to really happen?
It is interesting that that's still not set, right? The undercard is set, but the main event slot isn't. It does feel like they sort of waited to see how this one played out. And so there's something hanging out there, and they're going to fill that with a big main event. And the fact that they haven't done it yet suggests that might be where they're still trying to go, right? And that would be interesting as well.